What if I told you that an actual sitting American judge, a man who spent his career deciding other people's fates in a courtroom, sued a small family dry cleaner for $54 million over a single pair of pants, and the case was taken completely seriously by the legal system for 2 whole years? That is just number 3 on this list. And trust me, it only gets more unhinged from here. We found 111 real, verified, documented lawsuits from American history that will make you question everything you thought you knew about human intelligence. And by the time we hit number 1, you are going to lose your mind. So if you are already feeling the chaos energy right now, smash that like button so hard your phone flies across the room, because the algorithm needs to know that the people deserve to see this. And we are just getting started. 1. In 1995, a Virginia prisoner named Robert Lee Brock sat in his jail cell and did something no inmate had ever attempted before. He sued himself for $5 million, claiming he had violated his own civil rights by committing the crime that landed him behind bars. The truly spectacular part was his payment plan. Since he was broke and locked up, he asked the state of Virginia to foot the entire bill on his behalf. The judge read the filing, took a long breath, and dismissed it immediately. 2. In 1992, a man spotted a Harrier jet worth $20 million flashing across his television screen during a Pepsi commercial and thought, absolutely, that is mine. He collected 7 million Pepsi points, mailed in $700,000 cash, and formally demanded the military aircraft. Pepsi said no. He sued. The judge ruled, with remarkable patience, that a 30-second television commercial featuring a flying warplane was not a legally binding purchase agreement, and that no reasonable person should have genuinely believed otherwise. 3. In 2007, a Washington, D.C. judge named Roy Pearson walked into a family dry cleaning shop and never truly left, at least not legally. He dropped off a pair of pants, the pants briefly went missing, and when they turned up, he decided they were not quite right. He then sued the Korean immigrant family who owned the shop for $54 million, anchoring his entire claim on a handwritten satisfaction guaranteed sign hanging in their window. The family offered settlements repeatedly. He refused every single one. 4. In 1994, Stella Liebeck ordered a hot coffee from McDonald's drive-thru and spilled it on herself, and America spent years laughing at her for it. What most people never knew was that the coffee was heated to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, caused third-degree burns across 16% of her body, required painful skin grafts, and kept her hospitalized for 8 full days. McDonald's had received over 700 prior burn complaints about the same temperature. The jury stopped laughing and awarded her nearly $3 million. 5. In 2006, a Portland man named Alan Heckard looked in the mirror, then looked at Michael Jordan, and decided someone needed to pay for this. He sued Michael Jordan for $832 million, simply for having a famous face that Heckard happened to resemble. He then turned around and sued Nike founder Phil Knight for an additional amount, arguing Nike had spent decades making Jordan's face so globally recognizable that Heckard could no longer walk through a grocery store without being stopped by strangers. 6. In 1971, Nebraska State Senator Ernie Chambers walked into a district courthouse and filed a lawsuit against God. Not a church, not a religious organization, God personally. He blamed the Almighty directly for floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, and general earthly destruction. The court took the filing seriously enough to formally attempt service of process. The case was ultimately dismissed for one beautifully simple reason. God had no registered legal mailing address, and the summons could not be properly delivered to the defendant. 7. In 2009, a Bronx College graduate named Trina Thompson received her technology degree, spent 3 months sending out job applications, heard nothing back, and made a decision. She sued her own college for $72,000 in tuition reimbursement. Her argument was straightforward, and the Career Services Office had not tried hard enough to help her find employment after graduation. The college argued that securing a job after earning a degree was ultimately the student's own responsibility. The judge agreed with the college. 8. In 2015, a Texas man took a woman on a movie date, bought 2 tickets, sat down, and watched her spend the entire film staring at her phone and texting. He did not confront her during the movie. Instead, he went home, opened his laptop, and filed official court paperwork to sue her for $17.31, which was the precise cost of one movie ticket. He argued she had financially damaged him by destroying the experience he had paid for. The case briefly became national news. 9. In 2004, while a Los Angeles man had been visiting a psychic regularly and paying for sessions built around one specific promise. She told him he would meet his soulmate by Tuesday. Tuesday came. Tuesday went. No soulmate appeared anywhere. He filed a $25,000 lawsuit demanding a full refund of every session he had ever paid for, plus additional damages he described as compensation for emotional anticipation, meaning the court was being asked to place a dollar value on how excited he had been about a Tuesday that never delivered. 10. In 1991, a Michigan man named Richard Overton cracked open an Anheuser Busch beer, settled onto his couch, and waited. He had seen the commercials. Beautiful women were supposed to materialize. The mountains were supposed to turn blue. Something was supposed to happen. After years of loyal consumption and zero supernatural occurrences, he sued the company for $10,000, citing emotional distress, mental injury, and financial loss. He argued the advertising had created a reasonable expectation that the product simply never fulfilled. 11. In 1992, a woman purchased a brand new car with a sunroof, drove it home, slid the sunroof wide open, and was genuinely shocked when rain fell directly into her vehicle during a storm. She sued the manufacturer, arguing the sunroof was defective for allowing water inside when open. The defense team presented their entire case in approximately 4 sentences. The sunroof was open. Rain falls downward. The product was functioning exactly as designed. The judge dismissed the case before lunch. 12. In 2000, a man walked into a Kansas City casino buffet. He filled his plate repeatedly, returned to the line multiple times, and at some point the staff politely suggested he had eaten enough. He disagreed strongly. He sued the casino for $5 million, arguing that the phrase, "all you can eat," was a legally binding contractual promise with no ceiling, and that cutting him off before he personally felt finished was a direct breach of that agreement. The court did not see it his way. 13. In 1997, a man bought a box of Cracker Jack, reached inside for the prize, and pulled out a small paper sticker. He was not pleased. He filed a lawsuit against the manufacturer, arguing that decades of Cracker Jack advertising had created a reasonable expectation in the mind of every American consumer that the prize inside would be something meaningful, something worth finding. A sticker, he argued. I did not meet that standard. The court had to seriously consider whether a snack box prize could carry legal expectations. 14. In 2016, a California man ordered a cold drink at Starbucks, watched the barista fill the cup generously with ice, and decided this was fraud. He filed a $5 million class action lawsuit arguing that customers were paying premium prices for liquid beverages and receiving instead a cup that was majority frozen water. Starbucks responded that ice in a cold drink was not a secret. The judge noted that any customer could simply ask for less ice. The case was dismissed but generated enormous national coverage. 15. In 2014, a man had been faithfully drinking Red Bull for 10 consecutive years, waiting for the promised wings. They never came. He filed a lawsuit arguing the "Gives You Wings" slogan was deliberately deceptive advertising because he had never once experienced any measurable improvement in his physical performance or mental energy from the product. Red Bull, perhaps exhausted from the fight, quietly settled the class action lawsuit for $13 million and agreed to modify how they described the beverage going forward. 16. In 1983, a New York man bought a ticket to see Flashdance at his local movie theater, settled into his seat, and watched the entire film without a single dancer removing their clothing. He felt profoundly misled by the title. He marched to the box office and demanded a refund. When they refused, he filed a $25 lawsuit against the theater, arguing the film's name had created a specific and reasonable expectation about its content. He wanted his money back plus punitive damages for the emotional disappointment. 17. In 2017, a Florida man purchased a set of invisible ink pens from a novelty shop, brought them home, and used them to sign several real legal documents he needed to file with the court. He submitted the papers. The signatures were completely invisible by the time they arrived. The documents were rejected. He then sued the novelty company for selling him pens that functioned exactly as their packaging promised, arguing the product description had not adequately warned him against using disappearing ink on anything legally important. 18. In 2001, a New York woman woke up one morning and noticed her eyelashes had grown extraordinarily long after using a new mascara product. She was not flattered. She argued the lashes had grown so dramatically that they physically obscured her vision while she was driving and created a genuine road safety hazard. She sued the cosmetics company for $2 million. The defense quietly noted during proceedings that she had been applying approximately 3 times the recommended daily amount every single morning for weeks. 19. In the 1990s, a Houston firefighter named Shane Proler reported to work at the Houston Fire Department and informed his supervisors of a serious problem. He was deeply and genuinely terrified of fire, and he filed a formal legal claim arguing that his crippling fear of fire was a protected disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that the department was therefore required to accommodate him. The department pointed out with some restraint that fighting fire was the foundational and singular purpose of his entire job. 20. In 2003, a New York man hired a lawyer, lost his case, decided the lawyer was incompetent, and filed a malpractice lawsuit against him. That lawsuit also failed. Undeterred, he hired a second lawyer to sue the first lawyer for mishandling the malpractice case against the original lawyer. He was now 3 lawyers deep into a legal spiral that had begun with a single lost case. So the judge reviewing the third filing noted the situation had achieved a level of recursive legal absurdity rarely documented in court records. 21. In 2008, a Connecticut high school student fell asleep in class, which was already not ideal. His teacher walked over to his desk and slapped her palm down hard on the surface to wake him up. The sound startled him awake. His parents did not call the school. They did not request a meeting. They hired a lawyer and sued the school board, arguing the sudden loud noise from a palm hitting a wooden desk had caused their son lasting and documentable emotional harm, requiring financial compensation from the district. 22. In 1998, a Louisiana man could not sleep. Every single night, his neighbor's wind chimes clinked and rattled outside his window and drove him completely out of his mind. He asked the neighbor to take them down. The neighbor refused. He sued for $50,000. The case escalated so seriously that it proceeded to a full jury trial where multiple neighbors were called to the stand to testify about the chimes. Acoustic experts measured decibel levels in the yard, and a judge spent 3 days deliberating over wind chimes. 23. In 2006, a New Mexico woman opened her morning newspaper, flipped to the horoscope section, and found it missing. The column had been quietly dropped by the publication without announcement. She was furious, and she filed a lawsuit against the newspaper arguing she had been making real financial decisions based on the daily horoscope column, and that its sudden disappearance without warning had caused her measurable monetary harm. She wanted compensation for every financial choice she had made during the period when the column was no longer available to guide her. 24. In 2010, a woman in Utah needed to cross a highway on foot and opened Google Maps for directions. The app told her to walk along a stretch of road that had no sidewalk, no pedestrian path, and no safe crossing infrastructure whatsoever. She followed the directions, stepped onto the highway, and was struck by a passing car. She sued Google directly for the injuries she sustained while following their routing instructions. The case resulted in a $100,000 settlement and prompted Google to update pedestrian routing warnings. 25. In 2002, a man was sitting on his couch watching Wheel of Fortune when the puzzle appeared on screen. He stared at it, studied the letters, and solved it before the contestant did. He was certain of this. He filed a lawsuit against the show's producers, claiming he had rightfully won the prize money from his living room and deserved to be paid. He argued that solving the puzzle at home simultaneously with the broadcast gave him a legally valid claim to the reward. The court respectfully disagreed with his television theory. 26. In 2013, a woman bought tickets to see a film in 3D, put on the complimentary glasses, sat through the entire 2-hour movie, and walked out with a pounding headache. She filed a lawsuit against the cinema chain, arguing the 3D glasses were defective equipment and that the theater had been negligent for failing to warn customers that wearing plastic lenses over their eyes in a dark room for 2 consecutive hours while watching things fly at their faces might potentially cause some degree of eye strain or discomfort. 27. In 2003, a Nebraska man had a surgery performed entirely at his own personal expense after his health insurance company denied the claim. He recovered fully. He felt fine. Months later, fully healed and back to normal life, he filed a lawsuit against the insurance company for the original denial. He was not sick. He did not need the procedure redone. He was retroactively suing for reimbursement of a completed operation while standing in perfectly good health, which the judge described as a uniquely optimistic approach to medical litigation. 28. In 2008, an Ohio woman started taking a popular prescription sleep medication and noticed an unexpected side effect. The pills worked magnificently. She fell deeply asleep every night and stayed asleep. The problem was she also began sleepwalking directly to the refrigerator in the middle of the night and eating food she had absolutely no memory of consuming by morning. Over several months, she gained 23 pounds. She sued the pharmaceutical company, arguing their sleep medication had made her too unconscious to monitor her own late-night eating habits. 29. In 2000, a Florida man ended a romantic relationship, and his ex-girlfriend returned every single gift he had ever given her during their time together. He was not touched by the gesture. He was outraged. He sued her, arguing that gifts exchanged during a romantic relationship are a form of binding legal contract, and that she was therefore obligated to keep every item he had ever given her. Returning the gifts, he argued, was a retroactive breach of the emotional agreement that had existed between them during the relationship. 30. In 2011, a Pennsylvania woman had been taking a popular prescription acne medication, and it worked better than she had ever expected. Her skin cleared completely. She should have been thrilled. Instead, she filed a lawsuit against the drug company arguing that her entire personality and sense of self had been constructed around managing her skin condition for years, and that by eliminating the condition so thoroughly, the medication had essentially erased her identity. She argued she had lost herself and wanted the company to be held financially responsible for it. 31. In 1999, a Virginia man walked into a convenience store, bought a lottery ticket, scratched it, won nothing, and repeated this process for 3 consecutive years. He spent $5,000 total on tickets across that entire period without hitting a single major prize. He then filed a lawsuit against the State Lottery Commission, arguing that nobody had ever clearly warned him the odds of winning were extremely low. He wanted his $5,000 back plus damages for what he described as 3 years of mathematically unreasonable optimism. 32. In 2014, a man picked up a bottle of Snapple iced tea. I flipped it over, read the all-natural label, and noticed citric acid listed in the ingredients. He filed a lawsuit arguing that citric acid was a manufactured industrial compound, and therefore not natural by any reasonable definition, making the all-natural label on every bottle deliberately fraudulent. The case raised genuinely serious questions about federal food labeling standards, forced a national conversation about what the word natural actually meant legally, and was partially settled out of court. 33. In 2002, a woman signed up for an online dating website, filled out her profile, answered the compatibility questionnaire, and waited for her matches to arrive. The first match that appeared in her inbox was her own ex-husband. The website had connected them through mutual contacts without disclosing that its matching algorithm could surface people from a user's existing personal history. She sued the platform for emotional distress, arguing she had paid for the service specifically to meet someone new and had instead been digitally reintroduced to someone she had already legally escaped. 34. In 2010, a Tennessee man arrived at his office every morning and immediately felt cold. Not slightly chilly, genuinely and miserably cold. He asked management to adjust the temperature. Nothing changed. He did not give up. He began keeping a handwritten temperature log every single workday for 14 consecutive months, documenting the exact reading at his desk each morning. He then filed a formal lawsuit against his employer, arguing that sustained exposure to an unreasonably cold office environment over more than a year constituted a legally hostile and uninhabitable work environment. 35. In 2001, a New York couple hired professional movers to relocate their apartment furniture. The movers carried everything in carefully, set it all down, and left. The couple walked into the living room and immediately noticed the couch was positioned slightly differently than they had specifically instructed. Not damaged, not missing, just angled wrong. They filed a $30,000 lawsuit against the moving company for emotional distress, arguing that being forced to look at their own couch sitting in the wrong spot every single day constituted ongoing and compensable psychological suffering. 36. In 2012, a man joined a gym, received his membership card, walked confidently into the weight room, and began lifting every single day. After several weeks, his muscles were sore, his flexibility had temporarily decreased, and he was physically uncomfortable getting out of bed each morning. He filed a lawsuit against the gym, arguing that nobody had warned him that beginning an intensive daily weightlifting program during his first month would cause temporary muscle soreness and reduced flexibility. He wanted compensation for the physical discomfort of getting into shape. 37. In 2011, a woman named Jennifer Bayer filed a lawsuit arguing that the copyright on the song Happy Birthday to You had already expired decades earlier, and the song should be considered public domain available to everyone. Warner Music had been collecting licensing fees from television shows, films, and restaurants for years every time the song appeared. The court ruled entirely in her favor. The moment the decision landed, productions worldwide stopped paying licensing fees overnight, and Happy Birthday became legally free for the entire planet to sing without consequence. 38. In 1994, a man paid for a ticket to Universal Studios' Halloween Horror Nights, walked through the gates, and was immediately chased by an actor dressed in a full chainsaw costume, revving a prop saw directly at him. He ran. He was frightened. He then sued Universal Studios, arguing that a haunted attraction specifically designed and advertised to terrify paying customers had absolutely no legal right to actually frighten the people who had purchased tickets specifically to be frightened. The judge found the logic of his argument genuinely difficult to follow. 39. In 1994, an Oregon man was watching television when a Nike commercial came on, featuring the now iconic "Just Do It" slogan. He felt inspired. He went outside, pushed himself hard during a workout, overexerted his body significantly, and injured his knee in the process. So he filed a $1.5 million lawsuit against Nike, arguing that the Just Do It marketing campaign constituted reckless encouragement directed at the general public without any accompanying medical safety disclaimer or physical fitness warning label attached to the advertising message. 40. In 2015, a New York man picked up his phone, spoke a voice command into Siri, and the app misunderstood him completely and sent a text message to the entirely wrong person. He filed a $1 trillion lawsuit against Apple, claiming Siri had specifically and deliberately misidentified his accent, and that the artificial intelligence was discriminating against him personally based on how he spoke. Apple's legal team reviewed the filing. The court reviewed the filing. The case was dismissed. But the $1 trillion figure ensured it made every major news outlet. 41. In 2011, a Pennsylvania man picked up a packaged snack food, flipped it over, and read the nutrition label carefully. It said 0 grams of trans fat per serving. He felt good about his choice until he noticed the serving size listed was half an ounce, roughly 5 chips. He calculated that eating a normal human amount from the full container actually delivered measurable trans fat into your body. He filed a class action lawsuit that forced a federal labeling review and permanently changed how American food companies were required to display serving size information on packaging. 42. In 1990, a Michigan man pulled into a fast food drive-thru, placed his order, and specifically requested no pickles on his cheeseburger. He unwrapped it at home and found 2 pickles sitting directly in the center of his sandwich. He claimed an immediate allergic reaction, significant emotional distress, and physical suffering caused entirely by those 2 pickles. He then filed a lawsuit seeking $450,000 in damages. The restaurant's legal team spent considerable time in court arguing about the precise medical and emotional impact of exactly 2 pickles. 43. In 2006, a woman walked through the produce aisle of a Kansas supermarket, stepped on a grape, slipped, fell dramatically, and immediately announced she intended to sue the store for negligence. The case proceeded to a formal legal hearing. Then, the security footage arrived. It showed the woman picking up a grape from the display, placing it carefully on the floor directly in front of her own feet, and then stepping onto it. The lawsuit collapsed instantly. The store's legal team described it as the most efficiently self-defeating personal injury claim they had ever encountered. 44. In 2003, a man discovered his 14-year-old son had secretly created an America Online account, used his own saved allowance money to fund it, and had quietly been running up charges totaling $860 over several months. The father did not punish his son. He did not cancel the account. He hired a lawyer and sued America Online directly for allowing a minor to access the internet and spend money online without first obtaining explicit written permission from a parent or legal guardian of the account holder. 45. In 2009, a woman ended a relationship, left her dog at her ex-boyfriend's apartment temporarily, and then simply never came back for it. 2 full years passed. The ex-boyfriend had been feeding the dog, walking the dog, and paying every veterinary bill entirely on his own for 24 consecutive months. He eventually decided to return the animal to its legal owner. She sued him. She argued that leaving the dog voluntarily meant she had relinquished any obligation to take it back and that his returning it to her doorstep without warning constituted a form of harassment. 46. In 1993, a man settled onto his couch on a quiet evening, turned on the television, and immediately recognized the movie being broadcast. He had already seen it. He watched it anyway, confirmed it was definitely a rerun, and then filed a lawsuit against the television station for airing a film he had previously watched without warning viewers in advance that the content was not new. He argued his wasted evening constituted compensable time theft, and that broadcasters carried a legal obligation to clearly disclose when any film being aired had been previously shown to the public. 47. In 2012, a man purchased a new memory foam mattress, brought it home, and slept on it every night as intended. The mattress worked extremely well. It cradled his body so completely and delivered such deep, immersive sleep that he began experiencing vivid and intensely realistic dreams every single night. He woke up each morning feeling more exhausted than when he had gone to bed, and he filed a lawsuit against the mattress company arguing their sleep product had made his sleep so thorough it had actually destroyed his sleep quality, and he deserved compensation for nightly exhaustion caused by excellent rest. 48. In 1989, a Texas woman walked into a grocery store bakery, placed a custom cake order, specified exactly what message she wanted written on top, and returned on the pickup day to find a cake that simply said "Happy Birthday" in standard grocery store frosting. The baker argued both phrases essentially communicated the same celebratory sentiment to any reasonable person. The woman disagreed completely and with significant conviction. She filed a $10,000 lawsuit arguing the store had failed to deliver the specific custom product she had ordered and paid for in advance. 49. In 2008, a New York woman found an apartment listing online that described the unit as charming. She toured it, signed the lease, moved in, and immediately felt deceived. The apartment was small. She filed a lawsuit against her landlord, arguing that the word charming in a real estate listing was a legally enforceable product specification and that the actual size of the unit represented a breach of that promise. The judge dismissed the case but noted from the bench that it was the most adjective-based legal dispute he had personally encountered during his entire career on the court. 50. In 2005, the heavy metal band Slipknot was watching television when a Burger King commercial appeared featuring a fictional heavy metal band called Cock Rock promoting chicken fries. Slipknot's management did not find it amusing. They filed a lawsuit arguing Burger King had deliberately imitated their visual identity, their aesthetic, and their fan base to sell fast food without permission or compensation. Burger King maintained the fictional band was entirely original. Both parties filed aggressively for months and then quietly dropped everything simultaneously, leaving the chicken fries and the legal dispute both unresolved. 51. In 2000, a man in Illinois hired a local meteorologist to forecast the weather for his outdoor wedding. The meteorologist predicted sunshine. It rained heavily for the entire ceremony, soaked the decorations, ruined the catering setup, and sent every guest scrambling for cover. The man filed a lawsuit and made a very specific legal choice. Now, he named the individual weatherman personally as the defendant, rather than the television station that employed him, argued the meteorologist had delivered a negligently inaccurate professional forecast, and demanded full financial compensation for every damaged element of the wedding. 52. In 2004, a New Jersey woman had been attending the same church faithfully for decades, dropping money into the collection plate every single Sunday without exception. One day, the church assigned her a pew located significantly further from the altar than she felt she deserved. She did not simply move closer. She filed a formal lawsuit arguing that her decades of consistent financial tithing had created an enforceable legal claim to preferred seating within the congregation, and that the church had breached a binding social contract by placing her too far from the front. 53. In 1999, a California university student sat through an entire semester of lectures delivered by a professor whose handwriting on the whiteboard was, by any honest assessment, completely illegible. She could not read a single word he wrote. She filed a formal lawsuit against the university arguing that illegible whiteboard writing during paid academic instruction violated her right to receive a proper education she had paid tuition for. The university argued professors were not legally required to have readable handwriting, and the student argued that was precisely the problem and the court needed to settle it. 54. In 2013, a woman purchased a pair of sunglasses, wore them for several weeks, and one day they snapped cleanly in half. She filed a product liability lawsuit against the manufacturer, arguing the glasses were structurally defective and had broken under normal everyday use. The case was proceeding seriously through the court system until the defense team requested the specific circumstances of the breakage. It emerged during testimony that she had placed the sunglasses on her seat, sat down directly on top of them with her full body weight, and then described what happened next as completely unexpected. 55. In 2011, a man booked a 7-day Caribbean cruise, packed his bags, boarded the ship, and sailed off toward the tropics fully expecting relentless sunshine. 3 of his 7 days at sea were overcast and cloudy. He filed a lawsuit against the cruise line arguing the company had effectively advertised a guaranteed sunny vacation experience in all of their promotional materials, and that 3 cloudy days out of 7 represented a measurable failure to deliver the weather conditions the marketing had clearly implied he would receive during his paid holiday. 56. In 2005, a woman arrived at her office one morning and immediately smelled her coworker's perfume from across the room. This was not a new situation. The coworker wore the same fragrance every single day at what could generously be described as an enthusiastic volume. The woman filed a formal workplace complaint and then a lawsuit, arguing the overwhelming fragrance constituted a hostile work environment, and that her documented perfume allergy meant the scent was not merely unpleasant but an actual physical hazard present in her workspace every working day. She eventually received a formal accommodation from her employer. 57. In 2000, a Mississippi man sat down at a steakhouse, ordered a steak, received it, picked up his knife, and began attempting to cut through it. The steak resisted. He applied more pressure. He sawed back and forth with increasing effort for several minutes until he felt a sharp pain shoot through his wrist. He had strained it trying to cut his own dinner. He filed a lawsuit against the steakhouse arguing the steak had been served at an unreasonable level of toughness, that the injury was entirely the restaurant's fault, and sought full damages including physical therapy costs. 58. In 2010, a man checked into a hotel, enjoyed his stay, checked out, and reviewed his final bill at the front desk. There was a $2 resort fee listed that had never appeared anywhere in the advertised room rate when he had booked online. He did not simply pay it and leave frustrated like everyone else. He filed a class action lawsuit against the entire hotel chain, arguing the undisclosed surcharge was outright fraud. The case forced the chain to completely revise its fee disclosure practices industry-wide and issue refunds to thousands of guests who had silently paid the same hidden charge. 59. In 2003, a man in Kentucky walked into a grocery store, approached the self-checkout machine, scanned his items, and the automated system cheerfully greeted him by name when his loyalty card was recognized. He was disturbed. He filed a formal lawsuit arguing the machine's automated voice. Greeting was unwanted electronic surveillance, and that being verbally addressed by a grocery store computer without his prior consent violated his fundamental right to shop privately and anonymously without a machine initiating unsolicited personal conversation with him during a commercial transaction. 60. In 2009, a woman joined a neighborhood book club, attended meetings faithfully, and 1 month the group selected a novel she found profoundly and relentlessly depressing. She read it, finished it, hated the ending completely, and spent the following weeks in a state of genuine anxiety she attributed entirely to the book. She filed a lawsuit against the book club, arguing the group had a collective duty to screen recommended reading material for emotionally distressing content before assigning it to members, and that she deserved compensation for the psychological suffering the chosen novel had inflicted on her mental state. 61. In 1994, a man visited a carnival, paid his entry fee, and sat down across from a fortune teller who studied his palm and told him with complete confidence that good luck was heading his way very soon. He stood up, walked directly to the carnival games, and began spending money with the absolute certainty of a man who had just received a professional guarantee. He lost repeatedly at every single game he tried. He filed a lawsuit against the fortune teller, arguing she had created false financial reliance by issuing a prediction that sent him directly toward measurable monetary loss. 62. In 2006, a man spent an entire afternoon at a golf course working through his round, and on one glorious swing on hole 17, he achieved a hole-in-one. He celebrated immediately, then he remembered. The course was offering a brand new car as a prize specifically for making a hole-in-one on hole 16. He had done it on the wrong hole. He filed a lawsuit arguing the spirit and intention of the contest clearly entitled him to the vehicle regardless of which specific hole had witnessed his achievement. The golf course and the judge both disagreed. 63. In 2005, a man walked onto a car dealership lot, test drove a vehicle, and bought it after the sticker clearly advertised fuel efficiency of up to 40 miles per gallon. Over the following months, he tracked every single tank and calculated his actual average was consistently 36 miles per gallon. He filed a lawsuit against the dealership seeking compensation for the projected fuel cost difference across a full 10-year ownership period. He had done the math in advance, arrived in court with spreadsheets, and argued the 4-mile-per-gallon gap represented thousands of dollars in future damages. 64. In 2010, a man in California decided he needed a specific book from his local public library, walked in, and was informed the title had a 6-week waiting list. He joined the list, went home, thought about it, and then filed a formal lawsuit arguing that a public library operating on taxpayer funding was a public resource, and that a 6-week waiting list for access to that resource violated his constitutionally protected civil right to immediate access to publicly funded materials. The library pointed out that there was only one copy, and many other residents also existed. 65. In 2003, a man visited a zoo with his family, strolled past the bird enclosure, and stopped in front of a parrot. The parrot looked at him, opened its beak, and began calling out a series of insults directly at him in front of his children and several other visitors. He was humiliated. He filed a lawsuit against the zoo, arguing the bird had been negligently allowed to develop an offensive vocabulary and that the facility bore full responsibility for every word that came out of a parrot's mouth while the animal was under their professional care and supervision. 66. In 2001, a man booked a flight, boarded the plane, located his assigned seat, and discovered the recline button on his seatback was completely broken. He pressed it repeatedly. Nothing moved. He filed a lawsuit against the airline arguing that the full ticket price he had paid included the right to recline his seat during the flight, and that the broken mechanism had denied him a specific paid service he was contractually entitled to receive. The airline reviewed his complaint and eventually issued him a partial refund for the non-reclining seat he had endured. 67. In 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant was driving his horse-drawn carriage through the streets of Washington, D.C. at what witnesses described as a genuinely dangerous speed. A police officer named William West spotted him, chased him down, and pulled him over. He wrote the ticket, collected the $20 fine, and sent the driver on his way. It was only after the president had already gone that Officer West fully processed the fact that he had just issued a speeding citation to the sitting president of the United States and collected the fine successfully. 68. In 1998, a parent purchased an Easy Bake Oven as a gift for their young child, set it up on the kitchen counter, and watched their child burn their fingers on the heating element inside. They filed a lawsuit against the toy manufacturer, arguing the product was dangerous and defective. The manufacturer's defense team noted that the Easy Bake Oven was a functioning miniature oven specifically engineered to reach actual baking temperatures, which was the entire point of the product. The case was taken seriously enough to trigger a federal product safety review and eventually a full nationwide recall. 69. In 2012, a man dropped off a gray dress shirt at his local dry cleaning business, paid for the service, and returned to pick it up. The shirt came back clean, pressed, and a distinctly noticeable shade of purple. He examined it carefully, confirmed it had been gray when he dropped it off, and filed a $1,000 lawsuit against the dry cleaner, arguing the color change was irreversible damage to personal property. The dry cleaner argued the dye in the fabric had reacted unexpectedly to the cleaning solution. The man argued that was entirely the dry cleaner's professional problem to solve. 70. In 2003, a man in Georgia was sitting at home listening to his local radio station when the DJ announced the winning phone number for a cash contest. He grabbed his phone, looked at his own number, and noticed it was genuinely close to the number that had just been announced on air. He had not registered for the contest. He had not called in. He had never entered in any capacity. He filed a lawsuit against the radio station arguing that the numerical proximity of his personal phone number to the winning number entitled him to some form of official consideration for the prize. 71. In 2007, a man stopped at his local grocery store, grabbed a few items, and picked up a fortune cookie from the checkout display on his way out. He cracked it open in the parking lot, unfolded the tiny paper inside, and found a lottery number printed on it. He drove to a gas station, played the number, and lost completely. He filed a lawsuit against the grocery store arguing that the store bore direct legal responsibility for the quality and accuracy of the fortune printed inside a product they had stocked on their shelves and sold to him for money. 72. In 2008, a man ordered a pizza, watched the clock carefully, and when the delivery driver knocked on his door, he checked his phone. 32 minutes had passed since the order was placed. The advertised guarantee was 30 minutes. He was 2 minutes past the promise. He did not tip the driver. He filed a lawsuit against the pizza company seeking the full cost of the pizza refunded, plus additional emotional damages he described as compensation for the extended period of anticipation he had endured, waiting those extra 2 unbearable minutes beyond what the company had contractually promised him. 73. In 1996, a woman visited a tanning salon, paid for a full session, climbed into the tanning bed, and emerged afterward feeling like something was noticeably off. She stood in front of the mirror and confirmed her suspicion. One side of her body was significantly darker than the other. She filed a $50,000 lawsuit against the salon, arguing the uneven result was an act of professional negligence that required serious financial compensation. The salon attempted to explain that lying perfectly still and symmetrically inside a tanning bed for the entire session was also partially the customer's own responsibility. 74. In 2019, a man subscribed to Netflix, settled onto his couch after finishing an episode of a show, and did absolutely nothing. The autoplay feature kicked in and began the next episode immediately without asking. Then the next one. Then the one after that. 12 hours later, he was still on the couch, having watched an entire season he had never consciously decided to watch. And he filed a lawsuit against Netflix, arguing the autoplay feature was a psychologically manipulative design that removed his ability to make conscious viewing choices and had essentially stolen 12 hours of his life without consent. 75. In 2000, a man purchased a scented candle from a home goods store. The label described the fragrance as fresh ocean breeze. He brought it home, lit it, inhaled deeply, and stood there for a long moment. It did not smell like the ocean to him. Not even slightly. He filed a formal lawsuit against the candle company, arguing that the scent description printed on the label was provably false advertising, and that the product had failed to deliver the specific olfactory experience the packaging had explicitly promised every customer who purchased it based on that description. 76. In 2012, a man drove to a shopping center, fed coins into a parking meter that displayed a 60-minute limit, and went inside a store. He browsed longer than expected, returned to his car, and found a parking ticket on his windshield. He filed a lawsuit against the parking meter company, arguing that the 60-minute timer should have begun counting from the moment he actually entered the store and began shopping, not from the earlier moment when he had inserted his coins into the machine while standing on the sidewalk outside before he had even walked through the door. 77. In 2004, a New York man hired an attorney. The attorney fought his case hard, won a settlement, collected a contingency fee percentage as previously agreed, and considered the matter closed. But the client then filed a malpractice lawsuit against the same attorney who had just won for him. He argued the lawyer had accepted too large a percentage of a settlement the man now believed he had dramatically undervalued, and that winning the case at the wrong number was functionally indistinguishable from losing it. The attorney responded that winning a case was generally considered a successful legal outcome. 78. In 2005, a man hired a financial advisor, handed over his savings, and watched his portfolio grow impressively over the following years. He came back to thank the advisor and then immediately sued him. The problem was the growth had pushed him into a significantly higher tax bracket. After calculating what he now owed the government, the net financial benefit of the entire investment strategy was actually negative. He filed a lawsuit arguing his advisor had made him too wealthy too quickly, and that aggressive financial success without tax planning constituted a form of professional negligence with real monetary consequences. 79. In 2010, a man in Florida attended a live magic show, volunteered to participate in a trick, and handed the performer his vintage pocket watch as part of the act. The magician made it disappear. The audience applauded. The show ended. The watch did not reappear. The man waited backstage. He asked the performer directly. The watch was genuinely gone. He filed a lawsuit, and the case eventually determined through formal legal proceedings that the magician had not intentionally kept the watch but had actually and legitimately misplaced a family heirloom somewhere during the performance and could not locate it. For 80. In 2013, a Lehigh University student named Megan Thode received a C+ in one of her graduate courses and decided this was not acceptable. She filed a lawsuit against her professor, arguing the grade was unfair and would cost her $1.3 million in lifetime earning potential by blocking her path to the licensed therapy career she had planned. She wanted the grade changed and the damages paid. The university stood behind the professor completely. The court reviewed the case in full detail and dismissed it entirely, noting that academic grading decisions were not subject to litigation. 81. In 2003, a Florida man climbed into a taxi, told the driver his destination, and sat back while the driver navigated through the city. When he arrived and paid, he pulled out his phone, opened a GPS app, and calculated what he considered the optimal route. The taxi driver had taken a longer path. The difference in fare was exactly $4. He filed a formal lawsuit against the driver over those $4, and the judge spent 2 complete court hearings carefully examining 2 competing navigation maps side by side to determine which route was genuinely more efficient. 82. In 2017, a woman with celiac disease walked into a restaurant, specifically ordered from the gluten-free menu, informed her server of her medical condition, ate her meal, and became seriously ill shortly afterward. Laboratory testing confirmed the dish contained gluten, despite being listed as gluten-free on the menu. She filed a $1 million lawsuit against the restaurant. The case proceeded through court and raised national awareness about a startling gap in American food service regulations, specifically that restaurants could label items gluten-free without any certification, testing, or legal accountability for the accuracy of that claim. 83. In 2011, a Colorado man woke up one morning to find a large tree had fallen directly onto his truck during a storm overnight. He filed an insurance claim. The company sent an adjuster to inspect the damage, and the adjuster arrived on the property and began his assessment. While examining the fallen tree, the adjuster chose to stand directly beneath a second large, unstable tree on the same property. That tree then also fell. The adjuster was injured. A brand new separate insurance claim was filed on the exact same property within the same week as the original one. 84. In 2008, a woman in Texas walked into a hair salon, sat down, showed the stylist a photo, and clearly requested a trim that would remove 1 inch from her hair length. She left the salon and measured at home. 2 inches were gone. She filed a lawsuit against the salon, arguing the extra inch of hair removed had caused professional harm because her employment required her to maintain a specific standard of personal appearance, and the unauthorized additional length removed had directly compromised her ability to meet that professional standard at work. 85. In 2007, a man sat down on a Sunday morning with a freshly printed newspaper, turned to the crossword puzzle section, and worked through the entire grid carefully. He filled in 14 across with complete confidence. He mailed in his completed entry for the weekly cash prize. His answer was rejected. He went back to the puzzle and realized the clue genuinely had 2 valid possible answers, but the official answer key only accepted one of them. He filed a lawsuit against the crossword company arguing his answer was technically correct, and his disqualification from the prize was therefore unjust. 86. In 2009, a man set his alarm clock, went to bed, and was violently jolted awake the following morning by a sound he described as genuinely alarming. The alarm had gone off exactly as intended. The sudden noise triggered an involuntary startle response so powerful that he lurched sideways, fell completely out of bed, and landed on his elbow hard enough to require medical attention. He filed a lawsuit against the alarm clock manufacturer, arguing the product had failed to include an adequate volume warning label, and that the absence of that warning made the company liable for his injured elbow. 87. In 2004, a woman purchased a hair growth product, applied it as directed, and noticed results almost immediately. The product worked faster than she had anticipated. Significantly faster. Her hair was growing at a rate that required her to visit the salon far more frequently than she had ever needed to before using the product. She filed a lawsuit against the manufacturer, arguing that the accelerated hair growth caused by their product had forced her into a dramatically increased haircut schedule, and that every additional salon visit beyond her normal routine represented a direct financial liability belonging to the company. 88. In 2013, a woman ordered a meal at a restaurant, felt unwell afterward, and suspected food poisoning. She reported the illness and filed a formal complaint. The case proceeded to trial, and during testimony it emerged that she had returned to the exact same restaurant and ordered the identical dish 4 more times across the following week before reporting any illness at all. She had eaten the same meal at the same establishment 5 consecutive times, and the judge and both legal teams sat quietly for a moment, processing that particular detail before the proceedings continued. 89. In 2010, a man in California watched a movie at the theater, walked out, and became convinced the film was secretly based on his own life. The characters felt familiar. The situations felt personal. The details felt too specific to be coincidental. He filed a lawsuit against the production studio arguing the filmmakers had somehow obtained private knowledge of his personal experiences and used them without permission or compensation. The studio maintained the film was entirely fictional. He demanded co-writer credit plus ongoing royalties for every dollar the film had earned since its theatrical release date. 90. In 1999, a Michigan prison inmate sat in his cell. I reviewed the meal options available to him and identified a serious problem. The facility had switched from name-brand peanut butter to a generic store-brand version. He filed a formal lawsuit against the state, arguing that name-brand peanut butter represented an implied standard of basic incarceration, and that substituting it with a generic alternative violated the reasonable expectations of his custody arrangement. The state reviewed his filing, confirmed they were indeed serving him peanut butter, and argued that brand preference was not a constitutional right. 91. In 2016, a Tennessee man sat down at a restaurant, flagged down his server, and ordered a glass of iced tea. The server brought it promptly. He picked it up, took a long, satisfying sip, and immediately knew something was wrong. The tea was sweet. He was diabetic, so he drank the entire glass before fully processing what had happened. He filed a lawsuit against the restaurant, arguing that sweet tea containing significant amounts of sugar should be verbally disclosed by staff to every customer before the order is placed, and that the absence of that warning had directly caused him physical harm. 92. In 2011, a man in Ohio stepped outside one autumn morning and found a fresh layer of acorns blanketing his car. He looked up. His neighbor's enormous oak tree was hanging directly over the property line, dropping acorns onto his vehicle every single fall without fail. He documented the paint damage carefully over multiple seasons and filed a lawsuit against his neighbor, arguing the neighbor bore full and complete legal responsibility for every acorn that fell from a tree on their property, regardless of wind direction, gravity, or the fundamental biological behavior of oak trees during autumn. 93. In 2000, a woman visited her local zoo, walked through the primate exhibit, and stopped in front of the gorilla enclosure. The gorilla inside turned its head, looked directly at her, and held eye contact for what she described as an uncomfortably sustained and deeply unsettling period of time. And she filed a lawsuit against the zoo, arguing that the prolonged, unblinking eye contact from the animal constituted a form of intimidation, and that the facility had been negligent in failing to train its gorilla to look away from visitors after a socially appropriate and reasonable amount of time. 94. In 2014, a man reached into his grocery cart, grabbed a bag of lime-flavored chips, and read the front of the packaging carefully. It said, "Hint of lime." He opened the bag, ate several chips, and tasted essentially nothing resembling lime whatsoever. He filed a formal lawsuit against the spice company, arguing that the lime flavor present in the product was so faint and undetectable to the human palate that describing it as a hint was itself generous, and that printing the claim on the packaging constituted legally actionable false advertising, requiring the company to answer in court. 95. In 2002, a man pulled into a parking lot, found a spot, and noticed the sign listing the parking restrictions. He read it carefully, measured it with his eyes, and made a discovery. The sign was mounted approximately 3 inches lower on the post than the height required by local municipal ordinance. He did not simply note it and park elsewhere. He parked, received a ticket, and filed a lawsuit arguing the improperly mounted sign rendered the entire parking restriction legally unenforceable, and that every ticket issued in that lot under that sign was therefore invalid and should be dismissed entirely. 96. In 2018, a woman stood in a clothing store dressing room, pulled out her smartphone to check her appearance in a photo, and tried to slide the phone into the front pocket of the jeans she was trying on. It went in approximately 1 inch before stopping. She tried several other pairs from the same brand with identical results. She filed a lawsuit against the clothing manufacturer, arguing the deliberately undersized pockets in women's jeans were a consumer protection violation. The case was dismissed but spread across social media instantly and ignited a genuine national conversation about women's clothing pockets. 97. In 2003, a man pulled into a gas station, opened his car door, and bumped the door of the vehicle parked in the adjacent space. The other car's owner was standing right there and witnessed the entire contact. He examined his door immediately and found no visible mark, no scratched paint, no dent, and no transfer of any material from one vehicle to the other. The man who had bumped the door filed a $10,000 lawsuit against him anyway, arguing that even invisible contact with a vehicle constituted damage to its structural integrity and diminished its resale value. 98. In 2012, a man in Texas installed a brand new security camera system on the exterior of his house, facing outward toward his driveway and front yard. His neighbor filed a lawsuit against him, arguing the camera could theoretically be repositioned or angled in a direction that might allow it to capture a partial view of his yard. The camera had not been pointed at his yard. It had never recorded his yard. But the neighbor argued the mere possibility that it could be aimed that way someday constituted a present and ongoing invasion of his privacy and required immediate legal remedy. 99. In 2001, a man bought a ticket to an amusement park, walked past the roller coasters, and decided to ride one. He boarded, buckled in, and the ride launched him through loops, drops, and high-speed spinning for approximately 2 minutes. He stepped off. He walked to a bench and sat down feeling dizzy. The dizziness faded after several minutes, and he felt completely fine. He filed a lawsuit against the park, arguing it had failed to adequately warn him that a ride specifically engineered to spin riders at high speed through multiple inversions might temporarily affect a person's equilibrium afterward. 100. In 2009, a woman ended a relationship with her boyfriend and spent the following months processing the breakup. During that period, she decided she wanted weight loss surgery and scheduled the procedure. She then filed a lawsuit against her ex-boyfriend, arguing that his consistent and enthusiastic compliments about her appearance throughout the entire relationship had actively discouraged her from addressing her weight sooner. She argued his emotional positivity constituted a form of negligence that had delayed her medical decision by years, and that he was therefore financially responsible for the full cost of the surgery she now required. 101. In 2007, a New York man picked up his phone and called his adult son. No answer. He called again the following week. No answer again. This pattern continued for months. He hired a lawyer and filed a formal lawsuit against his own son, arguing that the parent-child relationship carried an implied legal duty of regular contact and communication, and that his son's persistent failure to return calls or visit constituted documented emotional neglect, causing him genuine psychological harm. Now, the court reviewed the filing carefully and concluded that calling your father back was not yet a legally enforceable obligation. 102. In 2014, a man walked into a busy coffee shop, placed his order, and gave his name as Brian. The barista wrote it on the cup, called it out across a crowded room, and handed it over. He looked down at the cup. It said Brain. He stood in the middle of the shop holding a cup that announced his apparent name to every single person present. He filed a lawsuit against the coffee chain, arguing the public display of the misspelled name in a busy establishment had caused him genuine embarrassment and measurable reputational harm among the other customers present. 103. In 2010, a woman visited a theme park in Florida. He spotted one of the large costumed character performers wandering through the crowd and walked over to say hello. The character turned toward her and delivered a full, enthusiastic body hug without any warning. She was not prepared for the physical intensity of the greeting. She filed a lawsuit against the theme park, arguing the unexpected full-body embrace from a performer in an oversized foam costume constituted unconsented physical contact and had caused genuine back strain requiring medical treatment. The park noted that character hugs were a prominently advertised feature of the experience. 104. In 2008, a North Carolina man purchased a treadmill, assembled it in his home, stepped on, and began running. He noticed immediately that something felt off. The belt was moving faster than the speed number displayed on the control panel indicated it should be. The discrepancy was consistent and measurable every time he used it. He stumbled during one session and filed a lawsuit against the sporting goods store, arguing the inaccurate speed readout on the control panel was a product defect that had directly caused his fall, and that selling a treadmill with a lying speedometer was a consumer safety violation. 105. In 1980, a New Jersey man purchased a pair of snow boots specifically because the label advertised them as fully waterproof. He wore them through an entire winter, kept his feet dry from outside moisture throughout, and then noticed his feet were consistently soaking wet from the inside. The waterproof material was trapping his own perspiration with nowhere to escape. His feet became so saturated he developed frostbite. He filed a lawsuit arguing that a boot marketed as waterproof should prevent moisture movement in both directions simultaneously, and that the manufacturer had failed to disclose a critical distinction between waterproof and breathable. 106. In 2000, a man opened his local telephone directory, flipped to his own listing, and found his name printed with the wrong middle initial. One letter was incorrect. He counted back through his mail records and identified 14 pieces of correspondence over the previous 2 years that had been misdirected because of that single wrong letter. He filed a formal lawsuit against the phone company, arguing the single incorrect initial in a published directory constituted ongoing professional negligence, and that the company bore financial responsibility for every piece of misdirected mail that had failed to reach him across those 2 years. 107. In 2015, a woman attended her nephew's birthday party, bent down to receive what she expected to be a normal greeting, and her young nephew launched himself at her with the full, unrestrained physical enthusiasm only small children are capable of producing. The impact knocked her off balance, she fell, and broke her wrist on the way down. She filed a lawsuit against him seeking $127,000 in damages. The court heard the case, reviewed the evidence carefully, considered the circumstances thoroughly, and awarded her exactly $1 in nominal damages instead of the amount she had requested. 108. In 2003, a man in Ohio was sitting on his porch one afternoon, minding his business when a pigeon flew overhead. The pigeon, as pigeons do, left a deposit directly on his freshly washed car as it passed over the parking lot exit. He looked up, traced the flight path back to a rooftop across the street, identified whose building the bird had launched from, and filed a single lawsuit naming his neighbor, the parking lot company, and the city of Columbus simultaneously as joint defendants. The judge described it as the most geographically distributed blame in any bird-related case the court had ever processed. 109. In 2003, a man bought a box of Cracker Jack. He dug eagerly through the caramel popcorn anticipating the prize inside, and eventually surfaced a tiny paper sticker. He stared at it. He had grown up hearing about Cracker Jack prizes. He had built expectations over decades of American snack food advertising. He filed a lawsuit arguing those decades of marketing had created a legally reasonable expectation of a meaningful prize worth finding, and that a paper sticker representing the entire prize fulfillment was a breach of the implied promise the brand had been making to American consumers for generations. 110. In 2002, a man sued a dating website because its compatibility algorithm matched him directly with his own ex-wife. He had paid for the service specifically hoping to meet someone entirely new. The site had processed their mutual contacts. He's identified overlapping preferences and surfaced her profile as his most compatible match. He filed a lawsuit arguing the platform had failed to disclose that its matching system could produce results from a user's existing personal history, and that being digitally reintroduced to someone he had already divorced constituted emotional distress caused directly by a negligent and deeply ironic algorithm. 111. In 2009, a woman ended a relationship, left her dog at her ex-boyfriend's apartment for what she described as a temporary arrangement, and then never returned for it. 24 months passed. The ex-boyfriend had spent 2 full years feeding the dog, walking it daily, and covering every single veterinary expense entirely out of his own pocket. He eventually decided to return the animal to its registered legal owner. She sued him immediately, arguing that her voluntary decision to leave the dog behind had legally relieved her of any obligation to accept it back, and that his returning it constituted unwanted harassment delivered on 4 legs. And that is the beautiful thing about human beings. It does not matter if it is 1872 or 2019. Somebody somewhere is always filing paperwork over a parking meter, a pair of pants, or a pigeon. We have always been exactly this ridiculous, and honestly, that is deeply comforting. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to Dumb History, and drop a comment telling us which lawsuit you would have personally filed, because based on what you just watched, we know you have one. We will see you in the next one.